Hello, hello, hello. If you thought the Star Sports recent debate on the Chesham Stakes was amazing, what about the Chesham and Amersham by-election? This is going to be a very interesting, shall we say, political discussion today on the polling station with Johnny Ward, William Kedjanyi. We're also joined by the one and only Neil Channing and the one and only Paul Krishnamurty. And if everyone is one and only, well, everyone is one and only. How are you, Paul?
Very well, Johnny. Very well. Yourself?
I'm not as well as you have because you took a position in the New York mayoral election and you only copped a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful bet that was. The classic overhyped name recognition candidate. You know, he was 4-9 like 2 months ago for that, Andrew Yang. He's going to end up coming fourth. Beautiful result.
That is absolutely beautiful, Neil Channing. I see you grinning there in the corner as if you took part in this plunge yourself.
I actually didn't get involved in that one financially, but Andrew Yang was somebody that people definitely kind of drank the Kool-Aid juice on during the presidential Democratic candidacy race, and I think some people who kind of sort of call themselves centre progressive felt like he was a potential president, and yeah, he sort of has let himself down quite a bit in politics, I think. So I was quite pleased to see him get beat. He's a horrible individual.
Yeah, speaking of horrible individuals, William Kedjanyi, you certainly aren't that. How are you?
Oh, very well played. Very nice.
I mean, that's as good as it gets from me.
Yeah. I am very well, thank you. I'm really excited for this today because we're going to be discussing two by-elections, 2 for 1, and I'm also interested in some of these trends which we're seeing. So all good, and very pleased I managed to make it through the mega week of Royal Ascot, the Greyhound Derby and the Euros somehow.
Completely unscathed. Let's start with Chesham and Amersham. What went wrong for the Conservatives, William?
Long story short, NIMBYism. That seems to be the accepted explanation. To sum this up, NIMBY is basically an acronym for Not in My Backyard, and it basically, I think broadly, describes opposition to new house building and planning projects, or basically construction that takes place in a certain local area. You're getting a lot of that with these new government planning permissions, which may be imperiled, I think, by what took place last week, and of course with HS2, which needs to go through quite a lot of places. I think those two things be big drivers of the Lib Dems' remarkable victory. The turnaround was remarkable, the size of the majority was remarkable, and I think also there were a couple of other factors. I read a really interesting piece by Mark Wallace of Conservative Home in the Eye yesterday, where he basically referenced the fact that by-elections take away the jeopardy factor. In a by-election, you know very much what is going to happen, and you don't have sort of the situation where in 2019 people were going to the Observer and trying to work out based on their algorithms how they should vote for the result that they wanted, with absolutely no certainty about the result at all. I mean, a by-election, you make your choice and you know who wins and gets sworn in. Easier to make anti-Tory coalitions with that when you don't have the spectre, say, or the hoped spectre of the Labour Party or a coalition or whatever. And I thought that was an interesting point from him.
Yeah, Neil, it's interesting. He mentioned NIMBY isn't there because we have a Dublin-based out by-election coming up in Ireland, in which housing is one of the poshest districts in Ireland, effectively one of the poshest electorals. But Sinn Féin, I think, are actually going to get in purely on the basis of a housing crisis, which isn't at all unrelated to NIMBYism. Was this result completely unexpected for you, or were you expecting the Conservatives' demise in this?
Actually, I thought the Tories would win it. They opened up 7-on. They got backed into 1.04 on the machine.
Oh my God!
And you know, on the day, I think the Lib Dems were really bigging up their chances. There was one report saying, "Oh yeah, the Lib Dems think they've come dangerously close to winning." One of the Financial Times journalists came out and said he'd eat his hat. It was a load of rubbish, and we have seen that from the Lib Dems before, where they sort of big up their chances the day before the polling to try and get out the vote, basically, to make people that were thinking they might not bother because it's it's all one-way traffic, come and vote. So, you know, there was a feeling of that. It was a genuine surprise. I think it was matched at 7-2, just kind of an hour before the result came out. And by that stage, you know, people will have seen canvassing returns and that kind of thing. I looked at a couple of things that I thought were quite interesting. So in 2019, in the general election, if you added the Labour and Liberal Democrat vote together, you got to 22,000. If you looked at 2020, the by-election, and you added the Labour and Liberal Democrat vote together, even though Labour only contributed 600 to that total, you still got to 22,000. So some people might, you know, if they were being fairly simplistic, just say, well, clearly what happened here is that the entirety of the 7,000 people that voted Labour in the 2019 general election realised that the only way to beat the Tories was to vote Lib Dem here, apart from just a few of them, a number of Labour voters that was actually less than the number of Labour members that live in Chesham and Amersham. So that would be one way of looking at it.
Are you postulating that there's a different future on the left in Britain from this election?
Well, no, I'm not actually. But let me carry on with this point, because you know, first of all, one thing we know about by-elections is, well, one thing we know about elections, full stop, is that older people tend to vote. You know, the younger the person is, the less likely it is that they voted. The turnout in this election was 52%. In the general election in the same constituency, it was 77%. And what actually happens with turnout is that the younger the people go, the less likely they are to turn out. So if the turnout goes down, it's not an even drop of people. You know, if you're 80, or maybe not 80, so you're 75, and you're 90% to vote in an election, you only become maybe 88% in a by-election. But if you're 30 and you're only 60% to vote in a general election, maybe you only become 30% to vote in a by-election. That's how it works. So,
so the median age drops effectively.
Yeah. So that would be bad generally for, you know, the more left parties or the centre-left parties. And it'll be better for the Tory party. The other thing that's quite interesting is if you look at the Green votes in the last few elections in Chesham and Amersham, so they got 2,009, not many, they're not a big factor. They got 2,900 in 2015, they got 1,700 in 2017, they got 3,000 in 2019, and they still got 1,500 in this election. So if the answer to this election was people became brilliant at tactical voting, nobody sent the email to the Green Party voters. So I think, you know, given that the Tory vote numbers went down from 30,000 in the general election of 2019 to 21,000 in this election, a fair number of the people that voted Liberal Democrat have to be Tory switchers. And just anecdotally, I spoke to a Labour friend of mine who went canvassing there, and she said it was incredible. There was a lot of HS2 on the doorstep. You know, basically they're going to dig up this old woodland, and they've done most of that already, actually. And obviously, you know, the Tories have had huge donations from building firms, and they want to rip up the planning laws and build on the green belt, even though they're sitting on loads of land that they're currently banking already and not building houses on. But she said it was like canvassing at the Chelsea Flower Show, which I thought was hysterically funny. Yeah, no, I think you can't just say it's down to tactical voting. I think there was a lot of Tory to Lib Dem switching going on. You know, I mean, it is an amazing result, but I don't think that it necessarily can be seen as a precursor to a massive progressive alliance where everyone wakes up and learns how to do tactical voting, because that hasn't actually been very successful in the past. I'll make one other quick point, because I saw something else quite interesting. I saw a list of constituencies where the highest number of people have got degrees in the country. There are 4 constituencies in the UK where more than 50% of the electorate has a degree. And those are Kensington, Wimbledon, the cities of Westminster and City of London. That's one constituency, commonly called cities. And the fourth one is Chelsea and Fulham. In all four constituencies, if you add up the Lib Dems and Labour vote, you beat the Tories, but all four currently have a Tory MP. So that shows how good, clever people are at tactical voting.
Paul, have you researched things as well as Neil for this show?
Yeah, well, I know these seats over many years.
He knows. He knows.
The dynamics
knowledge.
And you can put them in boxes of different types of seat, you know, like the cities, the London seats you mentioned very much belong in a particular box. The point is, I would say, I mean, first of all, the tactical business, you know, let's not put people into two camps. I mean, take the Green Party. The Green Party's doing well everywhere, but they don't just take left votes. The Greens have always had the potential to reach across because, again, you know, you can care about the environment, or you can care about your green and pleasant land on your doorstep without being a socialist, right? And so they go all over the place. And I think that what you had in Chesham and Amersham was definitely an anti-Tory vote for multiple reasons, like NIMBYism, HS2, but also probably the progressives working out this time that there's no way on earth Labour wins this seat, so we'll vote Liberal, hence that vote collapsing. And with regards to those seats in London, going back to 2019, this was one of the problems because in 2017, the result was so extreme. The Labour bounce from 2015 or 2010 was so extreme that you had a lot of seats where it was virtually impossible to read which one was in second place. The London and Westminster one being a particular case in point. It was a 3-horse race, and it wasn't trying to tell one group of voters you must vote Labour or Lib Dem was really never going to fly because it was so complicated. But I think that now it's a lot clearer, and in Chesham and Amersham, it was clear that the Lib Dems were in second. What I would say is, I mean, whether you call it a progressive alliance, whether you call it an anti-Tory alliance, this was the only way Labour, this was how Labour used to win. Right, when Blair won, this is the overlooked part of it. When I'm talking to you from Somerset, this seat here, the Labour vote completely collapsed between 97 and 2010. All the ones around it, the reason why Rees-Mogg didn't get elected first time round was that in Bath and North East Somerset. And this is what, you know, I don't like these terms, centrism and whatever, and the people put it in boxes, but it's that general feeling that people decide, a general consensus is formed that this is the nasty party, right? This is what the Tories said themselves. Theresa May said it herself when they were in opposition. Why are we losing? Why are we losing so badly? Because people believe we are the nasty party. Well, from 2005 onwards, the conservative media machine and social media machine rebranded Labour as the nasty party, right? So it's made it very, very hard to for the Labour Party to pick up those people in the middle. And likewise,
by the way, that wasn't just the Conservatives doing that. That was most of the Labour MPs were engaged in that particular activity. They felt that trashing their own party was going to be just a totally risk-free thing to do. And that once they got the leadership back, there would be no consequences for their actions. Now they're seeing the consequences.
Also, you can't start the story in 2015. You have to start that story in 2005. And Blair and Blair's supporters and Brown supporters will say, well, hang on, we got trashed by the anti-war people, right? Who then made out we were just like Tories. And then by 2010, all the young voters flipped over to the Lib Dems, right? As a result of their anti-war, anti-tuition fee thing, right? This is what Labour does in history. It does it over and over and over again. Various different factions in the party who care more about beating each other than beating the Tories, right? And it's happened again and again. There was just that unique time, and I'm not particularly crediting Blair with it or anyone in particular, but for that 13 years, the only time in 50 that the left has won, it came about because the Tories had developed such a negative brand that it was easy to flip progressive opinion against them. When the coalition happened, that alliance completely broke down. You know, Labour and Lib Dem activists have been at war with each other for the last 10 years. You know, it's been virtually impossible for anyone who is on the left to say, you've got to vote Lib Dem tactically to stop the Tories, because they're going to go, what? The Lib Dems who supported the austerity, right? And this is the problem. There is one side of British politics that knows how to get 44% rock solid. It seems very clear that those 44% of people don't have a particularly high bar on their party delivering anything or telling the truth, right? But they will do it because they'll do what they need to do to win. And the other 56% of the country will go on some purist agenda and fight amongst themselves. And
well, I don't totally agree with any of that, but I've got a couple of things I meant to say, which just in terms of the whole, you know, progressive alliance stuff, I do think that, you know, the Lib Dems have done quite well here, and you have to give them credit to an extent. But in terms of a general election and the chances of any of this being repeated in other constituencies, I did kind of look at the blue wall, and if you kind of really try and think, well, what are your kind of similar constituencies to Chesham and Amersham, you don't get a very long list, actually. No. You know, I came up with Woking, but that's got a 10,000 majority. Surrey Southwest, 9,000. Wokingham, 7,500. Guildford, 3,500. Esher and Walton, 2,700. Obviously, the latter two, you know, is a lot easier task than 10 or 9,000. But that's not really very many. And that's just going down their list of target seats, trying to look at sort of similar places to Chesham and Amersham. Obviously, every constituency is different. In London, they have a few, you know, we mentioned Wimbledon before, Carshalton and Wallington they've held before, cities as possible. But like in cities and Finchley and Golders Green at the election, you know, they put up really high profile candidates and threw a lot of resource behind them. At the end of the day, the Lib Dems have only got, I say only, you know, they've got 125,000 members. That's as good as they've had for years, probably. But, you know, in a general election, if they make a target list of, I don't know, 16, 20 seats that they're going to really go for in an attempt to kind of smash the blue wall, you know, they threw everything at this Chesham and Amersham. I don't think if they divide that up 20 times, those resources, they're going to have much chance of doing the job in a lot of those places.
Can we get you briefly in, Paul? We'll move to Batley and Spen.
Just, they can, it's limited, absolutely. But I mean, again, we can see it through history. Look at the seats that the Lib Dems used to hold before 2015. It's those seats, right? There's about 50 to 60 of them. Maybe if you were being really ambitious, you'd make it 80, right? But the battle there will always be Tory v Lib Dem.
Yeah, they lost. The other thing is, with the Brexit situation, they lost a lot of power in the southwest that they're probably never going to regain. I mean, they probably had like 14 seats in the sort of broad southwest from kind of Gloucestershire downwards, which they're largely not going to regain.
William, can I bring you in here on this? Just is the revised betting in terms of the Conservatives 3s on Labour 9-4 for Batley and Spen? I read that Keir Starmer he's removed his political director, which is part of a bit of a reshuffle. Now,
professionalisation, they call it.
Professionalisation. We could do with some of that at Star Sports. But if you were on the Conservatives at 3 on Batley and Spen, are you a little bit worried?
Yes, possibly a bit, because I think, if only because it might just smash the idea that, you know, the by-election good thing is just going to come in no matter what. But that said, I think that freeze on about the Tories in Batley and Spen is a much better bet than I think the Tories were in Chesham and Amersham. Chesham, Amersham, because of a couple of key factors. Firstly, really interesting thing, I noticed that there were fewer polls released, I think only a couple, for that particular by-election, the one just gone, than there have been for this one coming.
I think none, was there? I don't think there were any.
I think I could own. There was a story that referenced private polling for the Lib Dems twice, and I remember that, and that did bring about some market moves. But apart from that, generally speaking, it was mostly anecdotal, and it was mostly a story of, heavy local opposition to these things like planning and HS2, etc., that was feeding out. We've had a Survation poll for the upcoming by-election. It gives the Tories a 7-point lead, I believe. But George Galloway, who's running under the Workers' Party title, is taking 6% from Labour.
6-point lead.
6-point lead, sorry. And that 6-point lead, you could deduce, is basically held by Galloway. Now, obviously, there are caveats around this. I remember, I think, Thelma Walker, when she was running as an independent, but under the Northern Independence Party banner, I remember she got polled 6 in Hartlepool. That came to nothing. I think Galloway is a million times more likely, I should say, just quickly, a million times more likely to hold on to enough of that poll vote to hurt Labour than Walker ever was, with no disrespect to her. But I think the gap and the route through for a Tory win is, I think, much firmer for this week than it was last week. So I wouldn't necessarily be bricking it if I had a ticket on the Tories. But I don't think anything's a certainty, a complete certainty.
Paul?
I think they're pretty certain. I think 3-1 on is at least accurate, if not probably fair. The only slight question I would have is that Chesham and Amersham brings in is Chesham and Amersham was an old school by-election, in that the general rule of a by-election is that the government suffers a bit, that people are more motivated on the other side. But the polls are saying like the Tories are in front. And I've long thought that Batley and Spen was a seat that was kind of not quite like Hartlepool, but in the same way that it was Labour were overstated there. They had a soap star representing them. That's a unique situation. And look how well Tracy Bradbin did in the West Yorkshire mayor thing. The general swing in that part of the world and amongst the demographics of voters in those seats would say to me that the Tories are about somewhere between 5 and 10% ahead, and it's very unlikely that those people are going to swing.
And Neil, Starmer's 11-4 to go this year. So presumably you want to be playing that before this election if you think the above is true, I guess.
I don't really think he can go this year for several reasons. Firstly, on a technical reason, if Keir Starmer quits and doesn't want to be the Labour leader anymore and there's a leadership election, the rules of the Labour Party state that if you can get 20 MPs to support you, you can stand in that election. If somebody challenges Starmer as leader and stands against him, the rules of the Labour Party state that you need 40 MPs to nominate you in order to be a candidate in that election. The Socialist Campaign Group has only got 36 members. That's the left-wing group of Labour MPs. So if a left-wing person wants to stand against Starmer, they need him to quit rather than to launch a challenge against him. So they're not really going to be in a position to do that. If a more right-wing member of the Progress Labour First people, the people that are currently holding Starmer hostage and have forced him to sack all of his advisors this week, if they want to replace the leader, they're only going to do it on their own terms. And the most important thing for those people is to change the rules of the leadership race so that you can never have another left-wing MP as the leader of the Labour Party. Now, the way that they do that is that they bring either a motion to conference on a rule change, which they can't really do in September because this conference will be slightly split between the left and the right in membership. And in the unions, it will be split between the left and the right. But if they can win control of Unite the Union, the biggest union, then the next time that the Labour Party goes to conference, they'll basically hold all the cards. Currently, there's a race for the Unite leadership, which doesn't finish until I think October. And the right-wing candidate, Gerald Coyne, has stood before for that, and he's basically got a support base of about 40% of the vote. And the left have a support base of about 60% of the vote. But the left stupidly have decided to stand 2 different candidates in a 3-horse race. I think that's too late to change that now, actually. And I think the lady that's standing as a sort of people's choice left winger, doesn't want to pull out anyway. But if Gerald Coyne wins the control of Unite the Union, then the Labour right will change the rules of the leadership election, and then at that point they'll topple Starmer and they'll put in their own person. And that's been their ultimate end game the whole time. They're not really interested in anything other than taking control of the Labour Party.
Some big words there, William.
Yeah, indeed, and words that many people have agreed with. Many people feel the same way that Neil does, and I think, frankly, there's lots of evidence to show that he's right. The party looks in a mess, and I'm not exactly sure where it ends up. Is it managed decline or is it accelerationism? Looks like it's accelerationism, the way things have been going over the last week or so. And
does it know what it stands for? Like when you hear like discussions about the Labour right, Keir Starmer doesn't seem to be able to actually get his message across to voters. We had the Corbyn disaster. So what does Labour actually stand for?
Yeah, see, I think that's a bit more to do with Starmer not being a great politician, because he's essentially literally a middle manager. And I think a lot of the people who supported him, this is my hot take or theory on it, we've had this loss with Jeremy Corbyn. We need to just flip it, and we need to pick a guy who just represents everything that Corbyn wouldn't stand for, so that we can present that option to the public. The electability theory, right? But they forgot, I think, that Starmer fully was presumably a very effective technocrat to get where he was, and good when it came to things like Brexit legislation and scrutiny, as you'd expect. Just isn't a very good politician, so I'm not surprised.
Well, the problem with standing as the electability candidate is you have to eventually win an election, otherwise people don't really keep believing in it.
Paul, can I get you in on this, because you've spoken fascinating stuff about this, like how to win elections, the rise of social media. It's almost like you just put a load of crap out there, make yourself kind of quite I don't know, almost like a celebrity, throw a load of crap at the wall, and after a while people will just elect you, because they don't, it's almost boils down to what people will follow on social media, utter populism. Where is Labour going to go with this? And can it stand for something other than be a populist party like pretty much everyone seems to be becoming nowadays?
Well, no, I think they should be. I've said for a long time, like 13, 14 years, we should be the Democrats. That's the difference. The dynamics in America, the right-left dynamics, are very, very similar to the United States. The power that lies behind that, the media that lies behind that, the memes and the slogans that lie behind that are. And yet the Democrats have managed to create, over a long time, this grand alliance between socialists and liberals and progressives. And they all recognise who the common enemy is. And to go back to, say, Obama, right, that was a time when the Labour Party was imploding, right? And all of the narrative was against them. And the New Labour had completely run out of slogans and, just basically a tactical approach to how to win an election. And Barack Obama showed them crystal clear, goes into an election saying, we will raise taxes on people earning £250,000 or more. We'll even tell you that Bush gave them a tax cut, and we're going to reverse it. Right? In this country, they run scared of Rupert Murdoch and say that would be raising taxes. Right? But in America, the Democrat Party is a lot more effective at this. And Biden's just done the same thing. Gone into an election saying, I'm on your side. I'm on the side of the people on low wages. I'm on the people who are the victims of injustice. Right? And I'm willing to raise taxes on people earning £400,000 or more, and on the tech companies. And it works. But I just think that in this country, the non-Tory vote has forever had all of these constant divisions and factions, and just having several different parties. I mean, we go into, look at the leaders' debates in general elections. Basically you get a Tory standing there saying, I'm the establishment, I'm the government, stick with me, the safe choice. And you get 5, 6 other parties fighting amongst each other. It's a suicide pact. So we can call it a progressive alliance, we can call it all sorts of things, but what the priority of people who don't support the Conservative Party after 11 years of government, and as they drift into ever more extreme territory, surely the other 56% have got to get their act together and say, we will do whatever it takes. We will compromise.
And on that, Neil, surely the future for the left has to be, it has to be in a potentially good place, essentially with climate change, people coming out of a lockdown in which they've stopped being consumers for a year and realised maybe that life can be lived differently. Surely this is a time for the left to actually, grasp the metal.
Well, I mean, what I would define as the left has no real power at the moment. There's no, we have the left of the Labour Party has quite a small number of MPs, small number of councillors. The members of the Labour Party are frozen out of decision making. The Labour Party is being led by a small bunch of technocrats who are making a massive balls up of it. So, for people on the left, what I would consider to be the left in this country, the 600,000 people that became Labour, 400,000 people that became Labour members when Jeremy Corbyn became the leader, and a good proportion of the 10.5 million people that voted Labour in the 2017 election. I just think they're probably a bit fed up at the moment, really. If you look at, there are lessons to be learned from America, but to me the key lesson is that Joe Biden, when he won, is he obviously pushed the centrist Democrats pushed aside. God, that's awful. I've forgotten his name. Pushed aside Bernie Sanders by grouping together and getting him out of the race. But when they did that, they then embraced him. Now they don't have to all be best buddies, but the squad have been allowed to have some kind of influence on Biden. Some people would argue he's been pushed to the left on matters like climate change. He's obviously having some problems now because of filibuster and having one member of Congress who's not really a Democrat. But they have worked together as a party. Keir Starmer won his ticket to be the leader of the Labour Party on the basis, as well as electability and professionalism, on the basis that he was the unity candidate and he was sick of people arguing. This week he's briefed the media. This is not something that's randomly come out. This has been briefed by a member of his team to say that Jeremy Corbyn's suspension will not be lifted. He hasn't been told what he's done wrong. He hasn't been told how long he's going to be suspended for. But as far as they're concerned, they've got no interest in letting him back in the party. Presumably they think that can deflect from how badly they've done in Chesham and Amersham, or how badly they're likely to do in Batley and Spen. The other thing that just slightly interesting about Batley and Spen is I have noticed quite a bit of money in the last few days since that poll on 6% for George Galloway came out. I know we're talking fairly small amounts. These by-election markets are not huge, but George Galloway has come from 66 to 1. He was matched yesterday at 16 to 1 for that. I think that would be a major surprise. I don't really expect that to happen, but it does show, he was sort of talking up his chances of finishing second. I don't think he'll really do that, but I think he'll get 3,000 votes. And 3,000 votes is probably enough to mess it up for Labour. The one other thing I would quickly say about the Batley and Spen by-election is whenever you see a selfie, if you're in the Labour Party and you go campaigning, you're encouraged to take a selfie and post it on social media. And they think that demoralises the other candidates. It makes them think that Labour have got loads of people on the ground. And they always talk about Labour's great get out the vote and all this kind of thing. In Batley and Spen, whenever you see a selfie, it's 2 MPs, the candidate herself, and people that work for the MPs. There's never anybody that's there voluntarily. There's never anybody there that's not drawing a wage from politics. These people are not inspiring anybody. The MPs are there because they're getting an email every day saying, if you live within 100 miles of Batley and Spen, you've got to go there. The chief whip is telling them that they have to go there. Batley and Spen is a bigger constituency than Hartlepool geographically. It's also quite a weird constituency. Like there's one ward which is 80% Liberal Democrat. and they're probably going to get less than 1,000 votes. There are 2 wards that are 80% Labour, and there's another ward that's 80% Conservative. If you want to win a by-election, you have to go to the ward that's 80% Conservative and knock on the 20% Labour doors, because you need those votes. There's absolutely no chance that they've got enough bodies on the ground to go to those people. And so they're going to lose a lot of votes for people that don't even really know there's a by-election on, or don't care that much about politics, because they haven't got the bodies on the ground to just go and knock on their door.
We are running out of time. A lot of what you're saying there completely applies to Dublin Bay South as well, where you'll have 80% Sinn Féin voters in one and about 10% Sinn Féin voters in another. But William, fractured left, I suppose, to sum up before we get to the DUP briefly.
Yeah, very much so. I think also large amounts of left-wing people leaving the Labour Party have impacted it structurally. It's difficult because a lot of the people who did join and who were attached to Jeremy Corbyn tended to do a lot of the campaigning, the volunteer campaigning, of course. And I think that's been very notable. And it does really impact stuff like by-elections, where it is a resource game. The Lib Dems are very, very good at targeting the resources when they have them in the seats where they have the opportunities for them. And I think that could really show in this week's result.
I think, some sort of a podcast on the future of the left in Britain with the 3 fine gentlemen in front of me would be great. Sorry that my video just has stopped working, but you do get the picture. William, I think the best way to finish this is clearly to talk about the Democratic Unionist Party.
It is, whilst I write emails to Keir Starmer begging him to put your video back on. But the thing is, now we've said that and we've mentioned the professionalization, I don't think it's coming back. So a lot of this happening in Northern Ireland, which is a sentence that has been true, I think, every single week for the 5 years since the Brexit vote, which of course took place 5 years ago today. I was actually really wanting to hear more from you on this, because the DUP have been through a bit of a wild roller coaster again. That feels not entirely uncommon. Poots is out, and we have a one-man leadership election, which has been won by...
It's been won by Jeffrey Donaldson, who was the only candidate. But do you know what the really, and this has just come to my attention here, in the 100 years since Northern Ireland was created, and I mean this, in the 100 years, in all of the, so what's that, 3,650 days, so 36,500 days, the one day where where United Ireland seemed more likely than ever before was literally the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the state, because unionism is in such a mess at the moment. You've Michael Portillo, who has brought out 3 documentaries on Irish independence and the Civil War, on various other historical Irish programs, and you have Edward...
I thought you were going to say he joined the DUP just for a second.
Well, he'd certainly dress better than the DUP guys, but so anyway, so
he's a bit too right-wing for them.
Well, I mean, the DUP has traditionally been this party of, like, basically of these bizarre people, but very, very much a closed shop, no elections. You know, you'd Ian Paisley, then you'd Peter Robinson, then you'd Arlene Foster. It's now had 3 leaders in the space of a month, effectively. It's completely fractured. Unionism has never been in more of a crisis. Sinn Féin is now the biggest party in the south and will soon be the biggest party in the north without a question. And, you know, obviously a lot of this is going to depend on whether Scotland comes out of the UK. But Jeffrey Donaldson has a massive job, because you talk about the left here, and I'd love to talk about this like all day, but the problems in Northern Ireland at the moment are that there are working class loyalist communities who are totally disenfranchised with life and basically are totally unrepresented by the DUP. The DUP have been left behind. People are moving towards the Alliance, probably will move towards the UUP, and Jeffrey Donaldson has a massive job in his hands, William, to unite the DUP, which is in danger of actually becoming something of an irrelevance, as, you know, you have a middle ground of unionists who are kind of thinking, I can't vote for these lunatics anymore.
Another question to follow on, but a bit of breaking news first. There has been a reprieve in the, I cannot believe I'm saying this on Star Sports, sausage wars
wow.
How can this be breaking news? This is the Scottish postal voting deadline all over again.
There's a 6-month reprieve.
Did I hear Holyrood?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. There's been a 6-month delay agreed between EU and UK officials on, well, basically
I take it all back. Jeffrey Donaldson has nothing to worry about.
You need a breaking news filter, William.
Like exports between the ROI and Northern Ireland have gone up massively, and they're actually importing more sausages from the south. And I actually think British sausages are slightly overrated. I don't think any of you lads are overrated. That was a great show, I hope.
I loved every second of it.
It sounds.
Go ahead.
It's starting to sound to me like the DUP are in such disarray that Neil Hamilton should give them a shot.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think my job is actually to unite the Unionist people of Northern Ireland, bring them to the great family that will be United Ireland, possibly as part of the Commonwealth, and we'll all join up with our hands again with our brethren across the water. But I would like to see some response to the comments made today, which were pretty loaded at times on Twitter. Would you like to see a podcast, The Future of the Left, with the three gentlemen in front of me? I certainly would. Lads, have a great week.
You too, guys. Pleasure to be on as always.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you all.
And that was the polling station.